Room 348. He checked in alone, but something left with him. When he entered the room, he was carrying a tiny bag and his eyes were tired. Room 348 is the third floor, at the very end of the corridor. Just one night only. It was calm, pleasant, and nondescript about him that the clerk remembered being. However, by the time morning arrived, he had already left. It is not absent, still alive, having left, as if something had removed him from himself through the process of peeling and then walked away with his skin. The subsequent events included a series of ignored 911 calls, a room that was so disturbed that it was eventually sealed forever, and one of the most unnerving security tapes that the hotel had ever recorded. In the disturbing real story of Room 348, a guy checked in by himself, but something else checked out with him. This is the narrative of what happened. He is known as the man without a history. James Kentley, then 42 years old, checked into the Magnolia Suites Inn, which was located just outside of Amarillo, Texas, on a chilly night in November of 2013. At around 8:47 p.m., he arrived in a silver Buick that was carrying Oklahoma license plates. The only thing he had with him was a brown leather duffel bag and a paperback novel called The Mothman Prophecies, which he tucked under his arm. Later on, the front desk clerk, who was an intern working the night shift and was 19 years old, characterized him as courteous. It's a little bit random, something like to someone who hadn't slept in a couple of days. James made his payment in cash. The walk-in policy of the motel at the time dictated that there would be no credit card and no ID scans allowed. The room that he was given was number 348, which is one of the corner apartments. The one with the broken window pane and the outdated analog television that no one had bothered to replace despite the fact that it had expired. According to the surveillance tape, he was seen unlocking the door around 8:52 p.m., and he came in. Moreover, what was revealed was not him. The calls that were not answered by anyone. The initial call to 911 was received from room 348 at 1 minute and 11 seconds. Heavy static could be heard by the dispatcher, something that sounded like wind blowing over the microphone. Then a voice that was low and shaking said, "It's in the mirror," she said. At this point, I do not wish to continue to look at it. Suddenly, the call came to an end. Another phone call came in 3 minutes later. Not a single word this time. A loud thump followed by the sound of glass shattering, and then there was nothing but panting. The officers were sent out, but because of a collision that occurred on the highway that evening, they did not arrive until 4:02 in the morning. At that point, room 348 had reached a state of silence. There was a knock. There was no reaction. The door was opened by the manager with the help of a master key. The findings that they discovered were distressing. The things that the officers discovered. This chamber appeared to be off. He did not have any blood. Nobody appeared to have broken in. No furniture that is broken. It was a breeze. However, the mirror that was located above the dresser had been removed. It had not been broken, but rather carefully unscrewed and laid on the carpet with its back facing down. In spite of the fact that it was unplugged, the television was still on and displaying nothing but gray static. At first glance, the walls appeared to be covered in a substance that appeared to be soot or ash. According to the results of subsequent tests, however, the substance in question was found to be fine charcoal combined with human skin cells. Nothing had been done to James Kentley's bag. On the inside, there was a toothbrush, a change of clothes, and a letter that was only partially written and simply stated, "If I don't make it, it's because I opened the second reflection earlier," the speaker said. It had been taken from him. However, the bed was the thing that the police were most perplexed about. In spite of the fact that it was meticulously crafted, the indentation on the mattress indicated that someone or something had been lying next to him throughout the night. This is the footage from the elevator. At 4 minutes after the arrival of the police, at 4:12 o'clock in the morning, a motion detector on the elevator on the third level triggered. The elevator was seen opening, and James Kentley was seen exiting the building, according to surveillance footage taken from the lobby. On the other hand, something was awry. The only difference was that his clothes were turned inside out. His mouth appeared to be open as if he were about to scream, but he did not make any sound. His eyes appeared cloudy and milky, and they were not focused. How he walked was slow and careful, as if he was attempting to avoid disturbing something. There was no sign of his shoes. He did not turn in his check. There was no one he said anything to. The only thing he did was go out the front door and vanished into the dimness of the night. It was the body that wasn't the body. A few days later, the vehicle that he had driven, which was registered to a rental agency in Tulsa, was found abandoned close to a riverbed that had dried out 40 miles to the south. Included in the vehicle were an identical collection of photographs of the mirror in room 348. The sketches were all of a faceless creature with elongated arms, and there were dozens of them. A little shattered compact mirror that was damaged on the inside with what forensics would eventually determine to be tears mixed with blood was also found, almost as if he had never been there in the first place. There was a room that refused to be settled. Following the occurrence, room 348 was cleaned, restored, and finally relisted for occupancy. However, the guests started to grumble. Several individuals reported hearing a sound that sounded like a guy whispering to himself from behind the walls. Even though the room was vacant, some individuals asserted that they watched someone standing in the restroom mirror. I am certain that someone entered the room and knocked on the mirror. Within a short period of time, the staff started refusing to allocate room 348 unless it was absolutely required. After that, there was the night when the power went out in that room alone for a period of 7 hours, despite the fact that the breaker was operating normally. A decision was made by the manager after it was discovered that a guest was sleeping barefoot in the parking lot while murmuring about being watched from behind his own eyes. Room 348 was completely sealed. However, if you go to Magnolia Suites today, you will still be able to see it. It is the only door that has a steel bracket across the frame, and it is the only room that has frosted glass, despite the fact that the other rooms appear to be transparent. That is, if you knock, many people believe that you will hear footsteps approaching slowly from the mirror on the opposite side of the room. If this story gave you chills like the video, subscribe for more true horror and comment below. Would you ever stay in room 348?